David sat in the corner of the open plan office, his back stiff against the ergonomic chair that had never once felt comfortable to him. Around him, the constant murmur of voices rose and fell, punctuated by bursts of laughter that almost always seemed to come at his expense. He had once believed that people were fundamentally decent, that professionalism at work meant some baseline of respect, but 3 years at Mather & Cole Associates had stripped him of that illusion. His colleagues didn't even bother to hide their disdain anymore. The whispered jokes, the smirks passed over coffee, the exaggerated sighs when he spoke in meetings, all of it had become so normal that even silence felt like mockery. His boss, Richard Mather, was the architect of his humiliation. Richard wasn't loud or flamboyant in his cruelty. He didn't need to be. A raised eyebrow, a carefully phrased comment about David's lack of initiative, or a laugh that stopped just short of friendly. These were enough to set the tone for everyone else. David could almost admire the precision of it, if he hadn't been its target. Richard knew how to undermine without ever appearing to bully. "David, perhaps you should let Mark handle the client call. You tend to get flustered," he'd say, smiling, as if he were protecting David from embarrassment. Or, "I'm not sure this project suits your skill set," while assigning him meaningless busywork that left him isolated from the team. Over time, those little cuts bled David's confidence dry. At first, he tried to compensate. He stayed late, sending carefully worded progress reports. He volunteered for every task, no matter how tedious. He told himself that hard work was noticed, that it was only a matter of time before someone saw his dedication. But the opposite happened. The harder he tried, the more invisible he became. His successes were claimed by others, and his mistakes, real or fabricated, were magnified. Soon, people stopped even pretending to value his input. He became the office ghost, present but unacknowledged, tolerated but unwanted. The loneliness gnawed at him. In the mornings, he would stare at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, practicing neutral expressions so no one could see the despair. At night, lying in his small apartment, he replayed conversations over and over, convincing himself that maybe he had misheard the tone of a joke or misunderstood a glance. But the evidence was undeniable. He was not just disliked, he was despised. Weeks blurred into months. The mobbing escalated in subtle, poisonous ways. His chair would be tampered with so it sank slowly during meetings. Important emails mysteriously skipped his inbox, leaving him unprepared. On his birthday, when everyone else received a card signed by the team, his desk remained bare. Richard noticed everything, of course, and allowed it to continue, sometimes even adding fuel with a chuckle that made David's stomach clench. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. David had spent the weekend preparing a presentation for a potential client, rehearsing every line until it was memorized. He saw it as his chance to redeem himself, to prove he was worth something. But when he walked into the conference room, laptop in hand, Richard intercepted him. "David," he said smoothly, "we'll let Sarah take the lead today. We don't want to overwhelm the client." Sarah, sitting at the table, smiled apologetically, but David could see the triumph in her eyes. His carefully prepared slides were never shown. He sat through the meeting, his throat burning, as Sarah presented ideas he had drafted, claiming them as her own. That night, David didn't sleep. He sat in his dimly lit apartment, the city noise drifting in through the window, staring at nothing. The humiliation replayed in his mind like a broken record, looping endlessly until he wanted to tear his own thoughts out. He opened a notebook and began to write. At first just phrases: betrayal, silence, mockery, parasite. Then sentences: he doesn't deserve to breathe. He feeds on me. He consumes me. The writing spilled out of him, jagged and furious, until his hand cramped. Days passed, but something had shifted inside him. He no longer tried to smile at colleagues or pretend to be unaffected. He moved silently through the office, watching, cataloging every sneer and every laugh. Richard's voice, once merely infuriating, became unbearable. It seemed to echo in his skull, resonating in the hollow spaces carved out by years of contempt. David found himself fantasizing during meetings, imagining the words cut off mid-sentence. The smirk wiped from Richard's face. He pictured silence, blessed, final silence. The idea grew roots. It became a constant companion, whispering in his ear as he walked to work, as he sat on the train, as he stared at the ceiling in the dead of night. He stopped resisting it. Instead, he began to plan, not in explicit detail at first, but in broad strokes. Where, when, how. The possibilities multiplied, each one a small flicker of relief, until his obsession narrowed to a single inevitability. The train station near the office became his haunt. Late in the evening, when most commuters had already gone home, he wandered the empty platforms, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the echo of his footsteps merging with the distant hum of trains. There was something comforting about the vast, impersonal space, the anonymity of travelers passing through. No one noticed him there. No one cared. He began to imagine the station not as a place of transit, but as a stage, a place where endings could happen. Richard worked late often. Everyone knew it. He liked to remind people of his dedication to cultivate the image of a tireless leader. David waited, watching from a distance, noting when Richard left the office, which train he took, how he lingered with his phone in hand. He tracked the rhythms until they became predictable. The station offered shadows, blind spots, stretches of silence between announcements. It offered exactly what David needed. The night came cold and heavy with mist. David felt calm, almost detached, as if watching himself from the outside. He carried nothing conspicuous, only a heavy wrench tucked into his coat pocket, its weight both terrifying and reassuring. The station was nearly deserted. He leaned against a pillar, waiting, heart steady, breath slow. When Richard appeared, striding across the platform with his phone pressed to his ear, David's vision tunneled. The years of humiliation, the endless small deaths he had endured, collapsed into this single moment. Richard paused near the edge of the platform, scrolling through his phone. He didn't see David step closer. He didn't look up as David's shadow fell across him. The first strike landed with a dull, sickening thud. Richard staggered, a sound half formed in his throat, but no words came. David's arm rose and fell, mechanical, unrelenting, the weight of the wrench driving each blow until Richard crumpled, until the smirk was gone forever, until there was nothing left of the man who had devoured his soul piece by piece. David stood over him, chest heaving, the mist curling around them like a shroud. For the first time in years, the silence was absolute. There was no laughter, no mockery, no whispers. Only the echo of his own breathing and the distant rattle of a departing train. He dropped the wrench, the clang reverberating across the empty platform, and closed his eyes. The world at last was quiet.